Hey guys, Jack Dallas here. I wanted to talk a little bit today about the now shut down website Silk Road, which I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with already or have at least read about it in some capacity as it's made its way into the mainstream media over the last couple of years. I wanted to talk a little bit about what Silk Road represents to me and what this website kind of means in terms of the future of possible future free trade amongst free individuals in our society. I want to also talk a little bit about why I believe that Dread Pirate Roberts, the site's administrator, is being prosecuted so harshly by the U.S. government as well. And also talk a little bit about the underlying philosophy behind Silk Road, aside from its members. So, obviously, most people, like I said, are already aware Silk Road, it was an online marketplace. It was hidden in the deep web. A lot of people were using it to sell drugs freely back and forth, which is why it gained so much attention. It was eventually shut down in 2013. It only lasted about 2 years, but it really made a lot of waves in that time. So, as I said, the site was run by an administrator who called himself Dread Pirate Roberts. And one of the things that I found interesting upon researching the site and reading a couple articles about it was the fact that DPR, as he would sometimes be known, was apparently into libertarian and free market philosophy. And you can see here he actually kept a journal on his computer. This article here is from Forbes, where they had a couple of different clips from those journals. I've read many of them. And I just had one of the main ones up top here for you guys, where DPR writes, Silk Road was founded on libertarian principles and continues to be operated on them. It is a great idea and a great practical system. It is not a utopia. It is regulated by market forces, not a central power. Even I am subject to market forces by my competition. No one is forced to be here. The same principles that have allowed Silk Road to flourish can and do work anywhere human beings come together. The only difference is that the state is unable to get its thieving, murderous mitts on it. Interestingly, if you look down here when he talks about the potential for drug cartels to form, the interesting thing to me is that DPR cites man economy and the state, which was interesting to me because that is a Rothbard book, which I happen to have read maybe about a year or two ago. And when I see things like that, it shows me that this guy DPR was interested in those kinds of philosophies and had an idea that a free market, in order for that to be truly achieved, has to be completely separated from any form of centralized government. It simply cannot occur. True free capitalism can never occur with a government present. And that is why when you hear people disparaging the current economy in places like America and saying this is what happens within a free market, they simply don't have an understanding of what that definition actually means. I wanted to point this out because it shows where DPR was coming from. It shows that he was coming from a sort of goal of achieving true market freedom. What I mean by that is a marketplace without taxes, without government regulation, but still with certain restrictions to ensure the freedom of its members. For example, violence was not allowed in any way on the website, whether to enforce any kind of transaction or any other way. Now, DPR was prosecuted for allegedly ordering 6 hits through the website, murders in other words, none of which were actually followed through. And it is somewhat believed at this point that those claims may have been fabricated by the prosecutors and the FBI that were trailing DPR throughout the site's time on the internet. It is also possible that, this is just completely all false information, as I said, and that none of that actually was occurring. I know that DPR was all about, like I said, trying to create a free marketplace. And most of us realize that things like drugs are really decisions that should be left to the individual. If an individual chooses to imbibe or take drugs, it should be their right to do so, and they should be free to do what they want, so long as they are not affecting other people in any sort of way or creating violence in any sort of way. And I think DPR was trying to set up his marketplace in order to inhabit and sort of uphold these ideals. So interestingly, like I said, I wanted to point out that you can kind of see where he's coming from. And I would suggest maybe going on and just Googling some, different search terms as far as Dread Pirate Roberts' journal or Silk Road Journal. There's a lot of these quotes on here to see where he's coming from. So, more people than just myself were realizing that Ross Ulbricht, also known as DPR, he was being prosecuted, obviously, not just for his quote unquote crimes, but also for espousing the political rhetoric that he was. This is similar to a lot of people who have been either removed from society for putting out dangerous rhetoric in one way or another, or killed for doing so. For example, Michael Hastings. There's probably a 99.9% chance that Michael Hastings was murdered for the things that he had published, most notably about General Stanley McChrystal in the Rolling Stone article that got him fired. He was later killed in a mysterious car accident that even the maker of the car, Mercedes, said could never have happened in the way it did. I think of other people out there that have been prosecuted for having various beliefs about freedom, even going back to people like Voltaire. And I think that DPR is maybe just the modern equivalent of this. In this article on Mint Press, you can see that they had some interesting things to say about that. So up here, during the sentencing, the government argued that although Ulbricht was motivated in part by a political agenda, he must go through the political process to achieve change. Yet the strategy of both Ulbricht and Dread Pirate Roberts was specifically apolitical. Their particular strain of market anarchism, known as agorism, calls for creating change by using entrepreneurship to create counter-institutions to the state, media, education system, and other institutions typically funded by government or corporate entities. Supporters of agorism believe this will lead to the establishment of free communities, or agoras, that can achieve change without voting or violence. Now, here's what's interesting. If we go down further, Forrest, and they're referring to the judge who prosecuted DPR, called the philosophy dangerous. Down here she says, your words reveal arrogance. You are no better than the law. And she said that it was necessary to give a lengthy sentence so that anyone who might take up the flag of Ulbricht or the Silk Road would know they will face consequences. Now, I just want to pause here real quick, guys, to say a couple of things about this. What I think this demonstrates is that the prosecutors, in this case the government, were not so much concerned with what they refer to as the individual crimes of DPR or Silk Road. That is to say, they're not concerned with prosecuting due to the fact that drug sales were happening or tax evasion. I mean, obviously that kind of stuff matters, but what's more important here is that they are afraid of the underlying philosophy or the underlying goal of the website. That is to say, they are afraid of people who would be inspiring the ideas of a free marketplace, free of government intervention. They are afraid of people who are able to set up successful and efficient marketplaces which connect people efficiently without the use of taxation. And they are afraid of the success of these things without the regulations that we are consistently told we need. I think that what they don't want is for people to, for example, examine the normal, if you will, American economy where so much corruption and so much just wrongdoing occurs on a daily basis. There's so much waste. I mean, we have incredible debt created by fiat currency. We have regulations which benefit huge corporations in Wall Street far more than the people. And then we're told by our elected officials that all we need to do is write more of these laws and more of these restrictions and spend even more money and create more organizations. And then we'll be able to fight off all of this, mistrust and political cronyism and things like that. Then we can have true freedom. But what's interesting is that people, especially like DPR, are starting to wake up to the fact that this is all just a complete lie and that the government is completely incapable of doing such a thing and incapable of creating greatness in the economy whatsoever. The only thing they're capable of doing is meddling in the economy. What is sort of a threat to people like this judge is the idea that people can look at Silk Road and say, wow, the vast majority of people are extremely happy with the way that their transactions are occurring. There's no taxation. It's anonymous. It's Bitcoin. I'm not subject to inflation. And I don't have to really be subject to any kind of ridiculous government restrictions on this whole thing. So it's more the idea of this sort of institution, this type of marketplace, being a success which makes the government afraid far more than the actual quote-unquote crimes that were being committed. So when this judge talks about wanting to prevent people from taking up the flag, that means a couple of things. On the one hand, it means that the judge literally doesn't want another Silk Road created. They don't want another free marketplace, free of taxes and free of government restrictions. But secondly, they want people such as journalists or other, computer savvy people to be afraid in the future of espousing such ideals. They do not want these people going out there talking about these ideas and getting people interested in them. They want people to be afraid of creating freedom. That's what it is. They want people to be afraid of the idea of trying to achieve freedom, or the idea of people dropping out of the current political system to do so. That is also extremely, worrisome to them. So to get into this idea of agorism a little bit, I would suggest everybody does this on their own. But if you just want to go to the wiki page and read over a couple interesting things about it, it's sort of like another branch of libertarianism that deals a lot more with creating free marketplaces. That's what it's all about. So having sort of centralized marketplaces where people can go to look for their various things or services that they need, but yet having it be free of taxation, free of government regulation, tariffs, things like that, but just having certain basic rules which allow people's rights to not be violated. So avoiding violence, avoiding things like that. If we go down here to the ideology, this quote from Samuel Edward Konkin, the goal of agorism is the agora. The society of the open marketplace is near to untainted by theft, assault, and fraud as can be humanly attained, is as close to a free society as can be achieved. And a free society is the only one in which each and every one of us can satisfy his or her subjective values without crushing others' values by violence and coercion. That's very interesting to me, you guys. If we examine that quote for a second, what you'll find is that if we take these statements and sort of compare them to what the judge who was prosecuting DPR was saying, in a way, to me, that shows the irony of the situation. So when we talk about a marketplace, which is untainted by theft, assault, and fraud, as can humanly be attained, does that description sound to you like it is embodied by the American economy or any other developed world economy? Well, let's see, theft. What about taxation? Taxation is theft, and anybody can see that whether they're on one political side or the other. The interesting thing about democracy is that if the majority wants something that you don't want, your tax dollars are then used to achieve it. So, for example, if you were against the Iraq War, maybe you just happen to be against it. Maybe you're someone who's on the left who happened to be against the war at the time that it was started. You might be upset that even though you absolutely love paying taxes because you're on the left, your money is being used to fund a war that you can't stand. Likewise, if you happen to be on the right, maybe you aren't against the whole idea of taxation, but your taxes are being used to fund things like the welfare state, blah, 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 all these different things that you might happen to not agree with. So basically your money is stolen from you to achieve goals that you don't want within democracy, and that is one of the biggest problems. There's also the fact that inflation, which has nothing to do with the actual people, is a form of theft because you are stealing the value of people's money and savings in order to achieve government spending. It has nothing to do with you, but yet you are paying for it. And that lack of value of money does not affect the government because their possibilities are limitless when it comes to funding. Assault? Well, the state certainly has the complete monopoly on violence. We as individuals cannot act like the police. We cannot act like the military. If we are truly out of line and violent, obviously that kind of behavior needs to be stopped, and in a free society it would be. But when it comes to using the word assault, I think of all the recent, police brutality cases that have been coming out. I think of the incredible wrongdoings of the U.S. military, NATO, things like that going on abroad and at home domestically. And it makes me feel that that word might be the easiest to show people in terms of how the state itself is sort of far more evil than a free society could ever be, because the state, by definition, is a monopoly on violence. Lastly, fraud. Once again, going back to what I was saying about inflation, inflation is a wonderful form of fraud. all of the lies that happen in politics, all of the lobbying, all of the devious strategies that are used to get people to vote and donate money and change laws and do things behind closed doors. Things like that are the fraud that we need to be avoiding, not this completely made up fraud that we're supposed to believe would occur in a place like Silk Road. The interesting thing about it is that we are told we're going to avoid things like this by succumbing to the state. And at the end of the day, it is these things which we are essentially forced to deal with on a day to day basis by being encapsulated within the state's grasp. That is the reality. So, if you're interested in reading more overall about DPR or Silk Road, Wired Magazine did a two-part story on it. I don't know if they're going to do more or not. I believe this is it. The Washington Post also did an article on the journals I was referring to earlier. And there are a couple books. Some are already out, and I think some are still coming out on the topic. So here is one by Eileen Ormsby, which had a couple of these quotes I wanted to talk about at the end here. So this is one of the most interesting passages from the DPR writings, and I just wanted to get into this a little bit. For years, I was frustrated and defeated by what seemed to be insurmountable barriers between the world today and the world I wanted. I searched long and hard for the truth about what is right and wrong and good for humanity. I argued with, learned from, and read the works of brilliant people in search of the truth. It's a damn hard thing to do, too, with all of this misinformation and distractions and the sea of opinion we live in. But eventually I found something I could agree with wholeheartedly, something that made sense, was simple, elegant, and consistent in all cases. I'm talking about the Austrian economic theory, voluntarism, anarcho capitalism, agorism, etc., espoused by the likes of Ludwig von Mises, Murray Rothbard before their deaths, and Joseph Salerno and Lew Rockwell today. From their works, I understood the mechanics of liberty and the effects of tyranny, but such vision was a curse. Everywhere I looked, I saw the state and the horrible withering effects it had on the human spirit. It was horribly depressing, like waking from a restless dream to find yourself in a cage with no way out. But I also saw free spirits trying to break free of their chains, doing everything they could to serve their fellow man and provide for themselves and their loved ones. I saw the magical and powerful wealth-creating effect of the market, the way it fostered cooperation, civility, and tolerance, how it made trading partners out of strangers or even enemies, how it coordinates the actions of every person on the planet in ways too complex for any one mind to fathom to produce an overflowing abundance of wealth, where nothing is wasted, and where power and responsibility are directed to those most deserving and able. I saw a better way, but knew of no way to get there. So he goes on to say that he read more about these various ideas and eventually came up with the idea of Silk Road. Guys, this is where I just sort of want to pause and wrap things up here. The reason that I'm talking about this topic is essentially one, to get people more interested in the idea of marketplaces like Silk Road, to show that they work, to show that this is the future, that a truly free marketplace, most likely digital in nature, is going to be the only successful future that we can have in terms of an economy. The second thing I want to point out is that it is truly the state which is most certainly responsible for the vast majority of economic woes we have today. I'm talking about the lack of value of our money because of inflation. I'm talking about the incredible overregulation that goes on where starting a business becomes one of the most difficult things anyone wants to do, and that is, of course, leading to unemployment. And I'm talking about the ridiculous government intervention in the marketplace, which is only making things worse consistently. Administration after administration has nothing to do with political party whatsoever. They're all the same. So, yes, I do believe that DPR is being prosecuted far more for his philosophies and what he is trying to teach people than for actually running Silk Road. I believe that people like him are who the government is most afraid of. Not terrorists, not any kind of boogeyman threat from abroad, not fake Iranian nuclear weapons, not fake Al-Qaeda, which we might as well just call it the CIA at this point, because we all know that's who they are. What they're afraid of is people like DPR, who are going to show people that true freedom and true economic well-being is going to be achieved without the state. The state is simply an unnecessary institution. It always has been and it always will be. But this is the way of the future right now, guys. What we need to do is completely eliminate the state from the planet. I'm not just talking about America, but it needs to maybe perhaps start there. Or at least America, that government will need to fall in order to ensure that the rest of them do, because they essentially run the world at the moment. What we need is a complete decentralization. In terms of an economy, we need to be able to trade all of the goods and services, including basic ones like food, without taxation, period. The withholding of taxation and tax dollars is going to help weaken the state. So transactions that you do on places like Silk Road, which don't involve, tax dollars whatsoever, whether it's on a Bitcoin-based website, whether you're just simply trading with friends, whether it's a black market, do everything you can to avoid paying into the government tax systems. Avoid it. Use Bitcoin. Like I said, trade with friends. Grow your own food. Provide your own services. Take your skill sets and shop them out to friends and family, and do everything you can to try to make your living in a successful and honest and nonviolent way. But do everything you can to make that living and avoid paying taxes. And that's everything when it comes to buying things you need. Like I said, try to do it outside of typical exchanges, or whether it comes to selling your skill sets. Do it in agreement between you and another person. That's the way things should go. We don't necessarily have to do this through taxation. So guys, avoiding paying taxes, I mean, legally, I don't want any of you out there going to jail for tax evasion, but if we can try our best to do everything we can economically and pay the least amount of taxes possible, that is definitely going to help weaken the state. And things like Silk Road, what made them so dangerous to people like the government is they gave away a method for people to do it. It showed, aha, the digital option is the way to go. We can use Bitcoin, we can use a website, we can use Tor, we can use the deep web. It gives people ideas, and that's why it's so scary to the government. A truly free marketplace and a truly abundant economy, abundant both in terms of goods, services, and then also jobs for everyone, is only going to come without the state, and it is only going to come through inviting progress and not trying to institute economic protectionism, which only serves essentially the people at the top, while duping everyone else into thinking that their economy is going to stay vibrant by resisting change. That's not going to happen. It's also not going to happen by giving in to things like the TPP being fast-tracked by the Obama administration and having us, be told that this is the way to a modern economy. The state is never going to provide that for us, guys. So coming up with ideas like this, Silk Road, etc., this is the way of the future, and this is the way to go. So when the judge prosecuting DPR talks about not wanting to let other people be inspired by picking up the torch of DPR while he's in jail, I want us to pick up that torch, guys. What we need to be doing is picking up that torch and moving it forward. We need to be educating our friends and family about these different philosophical topics. We need to be telling people to read Rothbard, read Ludwig von Mises, read anything about economics that teaches you how to freely associate with people and create economic abundance. We need to show people that the political system and the state are not only outdated and unnecessary institutions, but these are institutions that have always been wrong and have no moral justification whatsoever for existing. People should be able to handle their own affairs, and we should be able to come together and interact freely without having the tyranny of the state not only direct how we interact, but take a commission the whole time we do it for doing nothing but making it harder for us to interact economically. We need to show people, first of all, how wrong these philosophies are, the philosophies that the government espouses about why democracy is so wonderful and why we need taxation and why we need to follow the system. This judge told DPR that he needed to go through, quote, the political process, end quote, if he wanted to effect change. How has that process ever helped anyone? Voting doesn't matter. You get the same results no matter what. We have to wait for legislative cycles. People in America can't get the things they want through the regular legislative cycle. I mean, sometimes it takes smaller issues to show people that. I think that's part of the reason I use the marijuana legalization argument a lot, because it's easy to show people the tyranny of the state through an issue that is so ubiquitous like that. It's interesting that the only states that have legalized it are states that have essentially a ballot initiative. So the states where people can actually vote for themselves have legalized it. The vast majority of states want it to be legal, and they can't because it's either not time to vote or their politicians don't feel like passing it. For example, in New Jersey, where dickhead Chris Christie decides that he would rather kill children than not get checks from the private prison lobby for his next election campaign. This is the kind of example we need to show people the tyranny of the state. So, guys, I realize I'm kind of going on and on here. Let me just sum it up. Do anything you can to interact economically with your friends and avoid taxes. Do not pay them when you don't have to. Try to interact without using anything that involves taxes, and try to defund the state in that way. Number two, educate people on these topics. Read Ludwig von Mises. Read Murray Rothbard. Read anybody that has to do with any of these different, ideals of true freedom. Give ideas to people of how to create marketplaces that can exist without the state. We need to offer ideas like that. We need to educate people. And I would say the third thing is just try to get people out of the political system. When people stop thinking that who they vote for affects change, and rather it's what they do for themselves that affects change, that is when the dominoes will start falling. We need to make people realize that true change can happen outside of the political realm. The political realm is no longer a viable option. It never truly was, but the state nowadays is truly outdated. It is an age-old institution which we never needed, but we need it less now than we ever did. It is an archaic institution, it is a violent institution, it is an inefficient institution, and it is simply propagating evil for the purposes of making a few people at the top rich and powerful. It is not helping you, it is not helping me, it does not matter who you are voting for. If you are supporting the political system, if you are supporting governments in any which way, you are supporting tyranny, and you are supporting essentially an industry of death to provide for a few people at the top, as I said. We need to show people that this is what's really going on, and we need to get people out of this system. I think I'm going to start talking about these philosophies a little bit more, you guys. What we need to do is create an anarchaic society which is decentralized, which propagates peace, which propagates economic well-being, and which prevents the state from ever coming back once we're able to overturn it. So guys, I'd love to hear some more of your ideas on this topic. Let's talk again soon.